Hello everyone, and welcome to my final presentation for our leadership course. This is my PowerPoint. Sorry the computer is a little messed up. It still works. But yes, my name is Ocean, and today I'm going to be walking you through my deep dive into chapters 8 through 15, the leadership experience. Over the course of the semester, we've looked at leadership from so many different angles. I've learned a lot, and I've learned about how to handle power, how teams function and work together, how to survive a crisis, and what it truly takes to grow as a person and as a leader. In this video, I'll be addressing 4 different key prompts that resonated the most with me. My goal today is to connect these academics concepts directly to, my real world examples and my personal experiences. I'm going to be showing how leadership isn't just a theory in a textbook, but it's a practice we all use every single day. So let's jump right in. Again, sorry about the screen. It still works. It's just a little messed up. I apologize. But yeah, here's a quick look at where we are headed today. First, we'll talk about power and influence from chapter 8, focusing on referent power and how to use it ethically. Next, we'll move to chapter 11 on leading teams, where I'll discuss my natural team role and how teams navigate conflict and success. Third, we'll look at chapter 13 on leading change and crisis, analyzing a real world case study of a CEO who handled a major disaster with transparency and empathy. Finally, we'll close with chapter 15 on my personal leadership development, reflecting on how perspectives shift this semester and setting concrete goals for the future. Let's turn to chapter 8. Okay, so starting with chapter 8. Daft breaks down the difference between position power, like legitimate reward, and corrective power, and personal power. This is all very important information, and so we're going to be talking about corrective power. Sorry, I had a brain freeze. And personal power, which includes experts and referent power. Out of all these sources, and one I relate to the absolute most is referent power. Referent power doesn't come from, a fancy job title or a huge budget or the ability to fire somebody. Instead, it comes from personal relationships, comes from mutual respect, and most importantly, trust. When a leader has referent power, people follow them because they genuinely respect and trust who they are, and they buy into their vision, not because they are focused, or not because they are forced to, or focus on the wrong thing. In my opinion, in my own experience working on group projects and in workplace shifts, I've noticed that people come together and work harder when, the boss, I've noticed that, bossing people around or relying strictly on rules doesn't really, usually creates a passive compliance or like hidden resentment, and it doesn't really work that well. But when you build genuine rapport, respect, trust, and you listen to people and show that you genuinely respect and care about people, and you care about their success, and you want to bring, their best effort out and on the table, I feel like that works the best. But yes, let's go to slide 4. Now, having referent power brings a huge responsibility, which leads to the second part of this prompt. How to use that power ethically and effectively, because referent power is based on interpersonal influence, and like the biggest trap a leader can fall into is manipulation. It is very easy for a charismatic leader to use personal relationships to get what they want, rather than what is best for the team. To use referent power ethically, I encourage myself in the principle of servant leadership. That means using my influence to uplift others, shield them from burnout, and give credit where it's due. It also means setting clear boundaries, so that personal connections never turn into favorism. Effective referent power requires transparency, and if I'm asking my teams to go above and beyond, I need to lead by example, most importantly. Show vulnerability and explain the way and the why behind our decisions. People deserve to know why, and it helps them work harder, I believe. When influence is grounded, ethics, it creates a sustainable culture where people feel valued rather than used. Nobody likes to feel used. Everybody likes to feel valued. Again, I apologize about my screen. Moving on to chapter 11. Draft discussions. The different roles that individuals play with team dynamics. Naturally, I have always gravitated towards the task specialist role. Whether I join a new team or I start a project, my brain immediately goes to organizational roles, organizational mode. What is our deadline? Who is doing what? How do we break this massive goal down into a bunch of smaller steps? I love setting up timelines, tracking progress, and keeping everyone focused on what we need to do, so we can get it done. But we need to execute this. You know what I mean? I love to get things, figure out exactly what needs to be done. However, as I've developed and gotten older, I've also noticed that my leadership awareness this semester, and I've realized that being purely task-oriented is not always enough. You know, in the past, I would get so hyperfixated on when something is due or how we are going to finish the checklist, and I would overlook the tension in the team and the stress and, you know, the moral issues. I've had to, you know, consciously evolve my style to incorporate socio-emotional behaviors, like encouraging, you know, team members, checking in on how people feel, and resolving conflicts before they get too big. A truly successful team needs balance in all of these situations and all of these categories of both tasks, you know, human connection and getting things done. So that's something I've learned. But yes, let's move on to the next slide. So, what specific strategies actually help a team succeed? Let's think about that. Chapter 11 highlights Tuckman's stages of team development: forming, storming, norming, performing, and adjourning. One of the biggest takeaways for me was understanding that conflict during the storming phase is completely normal and is necessary in experienced leaders. Often panic when team members disagree, but honestly, disagreement is a part of how we get closer and figure things out. You know, groupthink and, you know, get ideas, get it all out there. To help a team reach the performing stage, leaders must cultivate psychological safety. That means creating an environment where team members feel comfortable to admit things, you know, they can admit when they're wrong or admit when they have mistakes or when, you know, you just want to feel safe with critical thinking and, you know, you have to be clear and you want to be accountable. Teams don't just complete projects, they thrive. But yes, it's all part of the process. But yes. Next, let's turn to Chapter 13, which covers leading change in crisis mode. This is an important one. Crisis management. To answer this prompt, I want to look at a leader who managed an extreme crisis. They did a very well job, and I think they deserve credit, and I think I should mention it. It has to do with COVID-19. Brian Chesky, the CEO and co-founder of AR&B. During the outbreak of COVID-19 pandemic in the early 2020, when global travel ground to a sudden halt, AR&B's revenues dropped by nearly 80%, almost overnight. Their entire business model was, under threat. That's very scary, especially because they were thriving. And they were forced to lay off roughly 1,900 employees. About 20% of the workforce layoffs are usually a disaster for companies' public reputation and, you know, often handled cold-heartedly through automatic emails or sudden lockouts. But Chesky's leadership response stood out as a masterclass in crisis management. When global, you know, he didn't do that, you know. Let's go on to the next one. What made the difference in Chesky's leadership was his combination of radical transparency and deep empathy and his emotions that he brought. And decisive actions. Instead of hiding behind corporate legal speak, he wrote a heartfelt letter directly to the entire company. He openly explained the financial reality, took full responsibility for the decision, and laid out the exact criteria used to decide which roles were impacted. That's very important. Even more importantly, AR&B backed up their empathetic words with real actions. They provided generous service packages, extended health insurance for months, allowed, departing employees to keep their company laptops, and built an online talent surrogate to the situation. Nor did they treat employees like disabled assets. By leading with honesty and compassion, he protected the company's internal culture and maintained public trust, allowing AR&B to recover and resolve their problems and recover stronger than ever, when travel returned. So I think he deserves a lot of credit for that. Finally, let me reflect on Chapter 15 and my own personal leadership journey. This semester, coming into this course, if you had asked me to define leadership, I probably would have described a classic heroic leader, someone who has all the answers, takes charge in every situation, and personally drives the project across the finish line. I used to think that was the most important thing. I used to think good leadership meant maintaining total control over every detail. Over the past few months, my entire outlook on leadership has changed. This class has really taught me a lot about leadership. And, leaders have fundamentally shifted, recently. I've learned that true modern leadership is not about being the hero. It's about being the enabler. It's about moving away from how can I do this myself to how can I support and empower my team so we can achieve this together. I've realized that showing vulnerability, asking questions, asking for feedback, and admitting when I don't know something doesn't make me look weak. It makes me authentic and approachable. And I feel like that's a really awesome lesson. And I appreciate the lessons I've learned in this class. Slide 10. To build on this growth, I have set 3 specific, actionable goals for my continuing leadership journey. First, I want to practice actively listening. I need to practice that. In the past settings, I found myself formatting responses and thinking about what I'm going to say while someone else was still talking. And my goal moving forward is to slow down and listen, to understand rather than to reply, and to pay closer attention to nonverbal cues, physical cues, emotional cues, all of them. Second, I am committing to effective delegation. Instead of stepping in to fix things myself, I need to work on, when a task gets difficult, I will focus on coaching the team through it, letting people figure it out and helping them through it. They need to build the confidence and the capability, and I need to stop doing things for people just because I want it done my way. And third, I plan to proactively seek 360-degree feedback from my peers and supervisors at least once every quarter. Growth doesn't happen in a bubble. Getting honest assignments of my blind spots honest feedback is the only way that I can keep growing and evolving, honestly. And moving right along. To synthesize, to conclude everything we've covered today, Chapter 8 through 15 shows us that modern leadership is a interconnected web of human relations, strategic thinking, and personal self-awareness. Self-awareness is a big one. Power is at its strongest when it is built on referent trust rather than fear. Teams achieve greatness when structure is combined with genuine emotional support and psychological safety. Crisis test the true character of an organization, proving that empathy and honesty will always best spin and cover-ups, And finally, leadership development is never a finished destination. It is a continuous, lifelong process of learning and unlearning and adapting and unadapting. So, yes. Thank you so much for the time. Thank you so much, for taking the time to watch my final exam. Presentation today. Working through the leadership experience this semester has given me invaluable tools that I am excited to carry forward into my academic and professional career. I welcome any questions or thoughts in the comments. Thank you, and have a wonderful rest of your semester. Thank you so much for your time.